would argue CBI have said this be felt by workers.
And that's the point, you know, some people, including the Conservative Party and others, are branding this a jobs tax. But when you take this alongside the employers' regulations and the different rules around that, and we know that there's almost certainly further taxes on business coming, how does that square with the business summit you were at yesterday, which is all about trying to get business ready for growth in Britain?
Absolutely. I was there, and it was an impressive roll call, and all the right messages came from the CEOs and investors representing an enormous amount of private and sovereign wealth. They say the UK, they liked what the government is saying, but the reality is exactly what we're saying. There is a fundamental tension here. The Labour government want to deliver on their social justice agenda, and they have a mandate to do so, particularly around workers' rights, at the same time as making growth the number one priority. And it's a trade-off, and we will see in the next 2 weeks exactly how they balance that. One of the interesting bits of messaging, hearing out of the Treasury, hearing out of Downing Street, is that business isn't looking at one budget. They will look in the round, and the first job is to stabilise the public finances. That's good for the country as a whole. It improves the investment proposition. Never mind looking beyond one budget. This one has got a lot of focus, and business thinks it is going to get whacked.
Yeah, a lot of focus indeed. 2 weeks to go. Paul, thank you very much indeed. Paul Classer, though, our business and economics correspondent. Well, let's now speak to Tina McKenzie. She is Policy and Advocacy Chair at the Federation of Small Businesses and joins us down the line from Belfast. Very good afternoon to you, Tina.
Afternoon.
Just let's talk about what we were talking there with Paul, this national insurance potential rise. Do you view it as a jobs tax? What's the view from the world of small business?
Well, the biggest fear of small businesses right now is those employment costs going up even more. Our members tell us across the country that 9 out of 10 of them say that the employment costs they're really struggling to manage the continual increases, not least because then with the legislation that was proposed last week, there's an increase potentially of statutory sick pay. And so everything looks as if it's, it doesn't look great for especially those small businesses. So if you increase either national insurance on, for example, pensions that we don't currently pay national insurance on, or you increase national insurance generally, you're really taking the money away from the business, but essentially that takes the money out of the pockets of the people, because the businesses want to give as much of that pay in the round to the person. So they're already adding on the apprenticeship levy, they're already adding on holiday pay, they're already adding on lots of other things that actually really squeeze the amount of pay that can go into the employees' pockets. And that hurts employees, that may impact jobs, that may impact businesses. So, this social justice thing, the biggest social justice thing we can do is give people a job. And if we start to decrease jobs and not get the economically inactive back into work, then that's not social justice.
Yeah, and Tina, there are, there's a whole range of different issues there. But the CBI today are saying that they're prepared to potentially accept this national insurance rise for employers if on the round it is also accompanied by more pro-business measures. Is that what you're looking for too? And what would those measures be like?
Well, Darren, there's a very big difference between what big business can handle and what the small businesses can handle. So if you're there running a small business, struggling even to pay yourself at the moment, and you may have 2, 3 or 4 staff, then it can impact you a lot if you have these increases proposed bureaucracy, increase in sick pay, increase in day one rights, increase in this, that, the other. The message isn't good for the small businesses. And maybe the CBI are comfortable with that. But for us, Federation of Small Business, for those smallest businesses, which are 99% of the firms of this country, they are going to struggle. And they employ over 60% of the people in the country in the private sector. So maybe a few big businesses can handle this, but we've got to think about the economy as a whole. Now, I would like to think if the Chancellor is going to bring in these increases, that she does what we've done before, which is maybe ring fence the smallest, most vulnerable businesses with the Employment Allowance. Look at increasing the Employment Allowance to offset an increase in national insurance.
In saying that, Tina, we've had some news today around the fact that the unemployment rate has fallen slightly, also that there are fewer job vacancies. Is that something you're seeing, that there are fewer jobs effectively out there?
Yeah, and the employment numbers are calculated in a very strange way. We all know that over the last 20 years. What would have been counted as unemployment 20 years ago is now all counted as something else, depending on the benefit you're on. So the unemployment, there are millions of people in this country not working, and plenty of them that want to work that aren't included in those unemployment figures. So, you've got to look at beneath kind of what the definition of this unemployment figure is and look into how many millions are economically inactive and claiming it may be a different type of benefit or no benefit at all that actually would like to be back into work if we can get them the support that they need to be back into work. And so that's not a pretty picture. We're carrying some of the highest economic inactivity in this country than we've had for 50 years. And that's got to be tackled to get economic growth.
And just finally, in one sentence, if there was one thing that you guys want to see in this budget in 2 weeks' time from the Chancellor, what would it be?
Do a small business impact assessment. Do not do the small businesses that are trying to struggle day to day what you may think a big business can handle. Do not put small businesses in the country under. Support them. Give them an increase in that employment allowance so they can keep the local people into jobs and help the most vulnerable into jobs as well, because it's the local companies that do that.
OK, Tina, appreciate your time this afternoon.
Thanks, Darren.
Live there from Belfast, Tina McKenzie, thank you very much. Now, as we were just talking about that, job figures out today show that earnings growth fell earlier this year, boosting hopes of an interest rate cut by the Bank of England next month. Let's have a look at some of the figures here. UK average regular earnings growth fell to 4.9% in the 3 months to July. That was down from 5.1%. According to the Office for National Statistics, unemployment also fell from 4.1% to 4% in August, and job vacancies were down by 34,000 to 841,000 between July and September. That's the lowest level in more than 3 years. Now, let's talk about another big issue, and that is energy and the potential for another energy crisis, because the UK apparently is dangerously underprepared for a new energy crisis, and that's the warning today from a group called the Energy Crisis Commission. The Commission was launched earlier this year to review the economic impact that Russia's invasion of Ukraine had on UK households and businesses. Well, its report, published today, warns that the UK remains heavily reliant on gas and heating and power, and has failed to reduce energy demand. Let's bring in its chair, that's David Laws of the Energy Crisis Commission, of course, also a former minister in the coalition government. David, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Just first of all, talk us through when you say we're critically underprepared. What do you mean? What do we need to do?
Yeah, I think people often assume that when energy shocks occur globally, all countries suffer in a similar way, and that there's just not an awful lot that we can do about it other than hope. And we have tended to get an energy price shock affecting the world economy pretty much once a decade, which has done a lot of damage. But actually, when we look at how the last shock, the big increase in gas prices after the invasion of Ukraine, how that affected the United Kingdom, we find that the UK was actually probably the worst affected of the Western European countries. And that's because two or three things about the nature of the UK economy and the way in which we use energy. Firstly, as you've already said, a tremendous amount of our energy still comes from fossil fuels, from gas and from oil, that are particularly subject to these big increases and volatility in pricing. And that's what hit us very badly after the Ukraine invasion. Secondly, the demand for energy in the United Kingdom is incredibly high, including for things like gas, because our housing stock is very badly insulated. And we've really failed to get a handle on that over the years. It's much worse than many other Western European nations. So demand for energy, demand for things like gas is very high. And then thirdly, under these emergency situations where we get big energy price shocks, we are quite bad at targeting extra support at those individuals and those businesses that need it most. We tend to have very big untargeted interventions that are extremely expensive and often don't get the support that we really need, the people, particularly those in poverty, who need the support most.
So, but ultimately, if we are to try and mitigate some of this, that means a lot of upfront costs. Is that fair to say, that this is going to involve the government having to frankly spend quite a lot of money?
Yeah, it may not always be the government. Obviously, the private sector will do most of this investment, but it needs to get compensation for that investment through the price system. So we all pay in some way or another. It means that we have to make a very big investment in changing our energy supply, moving away from fossil fuels to things like wind power, solar power, hydro and nuclear power. We've got to make sure we've got a lot of power coming from nuclear. Those sources of energy are much more under our control. The prices are much less volatile than things like oil and gas. And although we have made quite a lot of progress in those areas, we're still much more exposed to things like gas prices than almost any other European country. So there's a long way to go. The new government, in fairness to itself, has accelerated a lot of the plans in this area since it was elected a few months ago. But it needs to go a lot further, and it needs to tackle the two other areas that I mentioned, the very high demand for energy, particularly things like gas, and the lack of targeted support for individual businesses.
Yeah, and Dave, just on that point about targeted intervention, what's your view on the removal of the winter fuel allowance for pensioners then?
Well, we can entirely understand why the government has decided to try to replace something that is not particularly well targeted in the way that they've looked at. The problem is, although they've withdrawn the winter fuel payment from some people on higher incomes who arguably don't need it, the way in which they've withdrawn it has also taken the money away from some people who are frankly still in poverty, including many pensioners in measured poverty. And that is not a particularly good way of dealing with this. We need actually much more information about those households in real fuel poverty so that we can target other support to those people more effectively. So yes, the winter fuel payment does not target energy price support very well, but simply removing it without replacing it with anything leaves a lot of people in poverty worse off.
And just very finally, David, while I got you, of course, you were a minister in the coalition government. There was a big budget in 2010. It was the start of what many saw as austerity. Rachel Reeves has got some big decisions to make in a couple of weeks' time. Have you been surprised by the rough ride, I think, that Labour have found themselves in the first 100 days? Is it akin to, I suppose, what you and the Conservative Party grappled with back in 2010?
It's certainly a very big economic challenge of the type that we had back in 2010, but it's different in two ways. I mean, firstly, this government's taken a lot longer than we did to set out its plans, and that has created a sense of uncertainty. It's meant that the news media has focused on other stories not helpful to the government. So the government have left quite a big gap between coming to power and being able to take action. The other big difference from 2010 is that although both governments inherited a big hole in the public finances, in 2010, we came off the back of very big increases in public spending. So it was arguably possible to rein public spending back a bit to make some savings. But Rachel Reeves inherited a situation where the spending situation has been much tighter during recent years. So there are not easy savings to make, which is why she seems to be looking at things like taxation and some of the debates that you've had on your programme a moment ago.
OK, David, really appreciate your time this afternoon. David Laws there, joining us live from central London. OK, we'll take a quick break on Business Live, but coming up in just a couple of minutes, we're going to be looking at how the markets have fared this afternoon. Stay tuned for that.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump, it would appear, is about to learn his fate. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. Sky News, get the full story first. Do you fear a fourth indictment? Is it a drone?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting.
Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
The judge made it very clear that she could see no justifiable reason why Sakoulas wasn't here facing British justice.
I promised I would get him justice.
Sky News, get the full story first. It's legal to let go. Set the speed and take the hands off. I'm Lisa Dowd and I'm Sky's Midlands correspondent.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news. I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
This is the game changer seat. Look, it even comes with binoculars. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Very welcome back. Let's have a look at how the markets are doing this afternoon. We'll start with the oil price, which of course has been heavily impacted European stocks today. A barrel of crude. Brent crude currently down nearly 5%, just under, as you can see there, $74 a barrel. That's after the Israeli government effectively said that the retaliatory strikes against Iran would not target nuclear or oil facilities, as some had feared. Despite the FTSE finishing slightly down today, this morning's wage growth data has led markets to price in an 83% probability of another 25 base point rate cut by the Bank of England next month. Now, some of the big fallers are, unsurprisingly, those oil giants like BP, as you can see there, and Shell. BP down, nearly 4% today. And the winners, the airlines, of course, who rely on that fuel. EasyJet and British Airways owner IAG are doing slightly better on that news from Israel. Meanwhile, the European indices have had a mixed afternoon. The Germany's DAX earlier trading at a record high. And American markets have opened to the downside. A lot of those chip stocks giving back gains from last week. as we can see there. And finally, just a touch on the currencies. We can see that sterling's doing pretty well against the dollar and the euro, up a smidgen. The euro slightly down against the US dollar. Well, let's get more on this. Let's join to Janet Murray, who is head of the market analysis at RBC Brewin Dolphin. A very good afternoon to you, Janet. Let's start with some news from some of the American banking sector. We've heard from Goldman Sachs today, and they seem to be doing very, very well.
Yes, hi, Darren. Thanks for having me. Yeah, we got a number of banks reporting today, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Citi. I think it all shows quite strong trading revenue results, particularly in equity trading. I think that's really thanks to the market volatility that we have seen in the third quarter that tends to support trading revenue. But also there is a clear recovery in the investment banking, deal-making business. So that really helps banks like Goldman Sachs, which is very heavy on investment banking. And overall, I think in terms of the net interest margin, that is still doing well. I think a lot of analysts were worried that as interest rates come down, that would be a hit, but actually turned out to be better than expected, these net interest margins income. So overall speaking, I think these American banks are reporting, including last week, JP Morgan results and Wells Fargo's, they all suggest that actually the banking sector is resilient and things are doing pretty well in America.
Yeah, a reflection of the rather resilient US economy, I suppose, to a degree as well. Let's look at the other big economic superpower, that is China. It's obviously now started a stimulus package, if you like, to try and rev up their economy, but it's been met with some mixed results, or mixed reaction, I should say.
Yes, I think this week the Chinese equity market has been very volatile, and today the Chinese market has fallen quite sharply. I think it's a few reasons. First of all, over the weekend, the stimulus announcement or like more clarity from the Ministry of Finance was not sufficient. Lack of details on the consumer demand side, how to stimulate that. But actually, over the past couple of days, we saw pretty disappointing Chinese data as well on the inflation side, on the export side, and also on the loan demand side. So all of that, together with the fact that there is a lack of clarity and the market is just very demanding. They want more and more from the Chinese government. So I think this disappointment with the policy and the data really have caused a slump in the market. But I think it's going to be trading in a volatile fashion, the Chinese market.
And just very finally and quickly, Janet, if we can, back here in the UK, a lot of focus on interest rates, what's going to happen next month. Now looking increasingly likely that we will see a rate cut.
Yeah, I think, first of all, the Bank of England governor, he already reiterated the bank is leading on rate cut. And today we saw the wage growth figure, which is slowing down below 5% now. So I think that just gives the bank a bit more reason for that rate cut in November. So I think, other central banks have already cut multiple times. The Fed have already done 0.5%, for example, and is expected to do more. So it wouldn't be surprising if inflation, if it goes in the right direction, the Bank of England will be cutting more.
Janet, as always, appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. That's it from Business Live for today. We're back tomorrow. Kamali's up next with the News Hour. Stay tuned to Sky News.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
It is 5 o'clock. I'm Kamali Melbourne, and this is the News Hour. 60 minutes of news, analysis, and interviews. Our top stories. Sarah Sharif Trale court is played a 999 call in which the 10-year-old's father tells the operator he's killed his daughter.
Your daughter has died.
I killed my daughter. I killed my daughter.
Funeral warning: the case of a necrophiliac that sparked calls for regulation. There's an inquiry here as anyone can set themselves up as a funeral director and keep bodies in the garage. UK riots. Sky News investigates who fueled the summer violence with a surprising finding about British-linked groups. Inside Sudan's cholera crisis, how millions of people displaced by war face a new fight against a deadly disease.
This is the hidden front line in Sudan's war. There may not be bullets and bombs, but there are thousands of displaced people suffering from disease because of the state of collapse.